My daughter inherited the lake house, 4 bedrooms, wrap-around porch, the dock where her mother taught her to fish, while I was handed a deed to a storage unit in Denton, Texas, 43 square feet. My son-in-law laughed when he heard that. Actually laughed right there in the attorney's office like I just told a joke at a party. My wife of 38 years had been gone 11 days. The attorney's name was Patricia Holloway, a calm woman in her 60s who didn't flinch when my son-in-law laughed. She just waited. She had that quality, stillness, and I remember thinking my wife would have liked her. Rose had planned the estate herself. That much was clear from the document's thickness. She'd spent the last 14 months, the months I thought she was just tying things up, doing something else entirely. Patricia read the will in order. The lake house in Clearwater, Minnesota, appraised at $2.4 million, went to my daughter Audrey. The investment accounts, the retirement portfolio through Meridian Wealth, the life insurance payout, all of it went to Audrey and her husband, Chet, total value just under $3 million. Then my name. To my husband Lawrence Dodd, I leave the storage property located at 1408 Millbrook Industrial Drive, Denton, Texas. Current assessed value $41,000. My son-in-law said something under his breath. My daughter didn't stop him. Patricia looked up over her reading glasses. There is also a sealed letter addressed to Lawrence, with instructions that it be opened at the property. She slid an envelope across the table, cream-colored, Rose's handwriting on the front. Lawrence, open at Millbrook. Chet leaned back. So that's it? He gets a storage shed? Patricia's expression didn't change. The will is clear and uncontested. Mrs. Dodd worked with our office for over a year on this plan. It was executed voluntarily and with full capacity. My daughter touched her husband's arm. Let it go. He didn't let it go. He looked at me across the table. No offense, Lawrence, but this doesn't make sense. She had $4 million and she gave you a concrete box in an industrial park. I stared at the envelope in my hands, Rose's handwriting, the loop in the L, the way she crossed her W's. 38 years of watching her write grocery lists and birthday cards and thank you notes, and I could still feel my throat tighten just from the shape of her letters. I don't know, I said. I haven't seen it yet. Audrey wouldn't look at me. That night I drove to the house, the lake house, technically Audrey's now, to get the rest of my things. 3 boxes. Some clothes, my books, the framed photo from our 25th anniversary. Rose in a yellow cardigan standing on the dock, squinting into the sun, laughing at something I'd said. Chet met me at the door. He had a list. He held it up, typed on his phone. There's some question about the furniture. The attorney said personal effects not specifically bequeathed revert to the estate. So the antiques, the dining set, the artwork in the hallway, those stay. He was looking at the framed photo in my hand. The frame, he said. That's sterling silver. Audrey and I would like to keep that. I looked at him for a long moment. I just want the photo. He shook his head. The photo's inside the frame. I set it down on the entry table and walked to my car. I didn't look back. Some things you can't fight and stay clean doing it. I spent the first night in a motel off the highway. $49. Continental breakfast. I lay on top of the covers and stared at the water stain on the ceiling and thought about Rose. We'd met in 1984. She was a property assessor for Hennepin County, young and precise and funny in a way that snuck up on you. I was a high school shop teacher. She made 3 times what I did, and she never once made me feel it. We got married at a courthouse in October with 2 witnesses and a bottle of champagne we split in the parking lot afterward. 38 years, 3 houses, 1 daughter. And then 14 months ago, she sat me down at the kitchen table and said the words every married person dreads and somehow never believes will be for them. Stage 4, pancreatic. After that, everything moved fast and slow at the same time. Hospice by January. Her sister came from Phoenix. Audrey visited twice, maybe 3 times, but she was always heading out when I was coming in. Important calls, she said. Work things. Rose held on longer than they said she would. The last night, she squeezed my hand and pulled me close enough that I could feel her breath against my ear. Lawrence, go to Millbrook. Open the letter there. Don't let Chet touch it. I didn't understand, but I said I wouldn't. She passed the next morning. March 4th, 61 years old. 11 days later, I was sitting in Patricia Holloway's office with a sealed envelope and a deed to a storage property in Denton. 2 weeks after the will reading, I was still at the motel when Chet showed up. He had a man with him, mid-50s, gray suit, briefcase. He introduced him as an estate consultant named Morrow. They sat across from me at the motel room's small table. Morrow set a document on the surface between us. The header read, Durable Financial Power of Attorney in bold. Mr. Dodd, he began. Your son-in-law is concerned about your welfare during this difficult transition. This document would allow him to manage your financial and property decisions, including the Millbrook asset, while you settle into a new living arrangement. I read the first page slowly. The second page listed the Millbrook property by address. The third page had a section highlighted in yellow, emergency conservatorship. If the principal is deemed unable to manage his own affairs, the agent may petition the court for guardianship without prior notice. I set it down. What living arrangement? I asked. Chet cleared his throat. There's a really nice independent living community in Garland, close to Audrey. You'd have your own room, meals, social activities. I'm 63, I said. You're recently widowed. You're living out of a motel. Morrow's voice was smooth. The court would see that and find it concerning. I looked at Chet. You'd petition a court? I'm trying to help you, Lawrence. I closed the document and pushed it back across the table. Get out. Chet stood. Think about it. Because if you don't cooperate, Morrow files on Monday. Judge takes one look at your situation and you lose control of everything, including whatever's in that storage unit. He picked up the document. You've got until Friday. They left. I sat in the quiet and thought about Rose's voice in my ear. Go to Millbrook. Don't let Chet touch it. That Thursday, I drove 3 hours south to Denton. The address was in an industrial park off the highway, the kind of place you drive past without noticing. A long, flat building divided into numbered bays, corrugated metal, a chain-link fence along the perimeter. Unit 1408 was at the far end, ground level, roll-up door, padlock. I had 2 keys Patricia had given me. One for the padlock. One, she said, for something inside. I lifted the door. I don't know what I expected. Furniture and storage, maybe. Old equipment. The kind of junk people pay $20 a month to hold onto and never touch again. It wasn't junk, the unit was clean. Fluorescent work light mounted to the ceiling, extension cord running to an outlet at the back. Folding table against the left wall with a legal-size envelope taped to the surface. Rose's handwriting again. Lawrence, sit down first. I sat down on the metal chair she'd left next to the table. The unit held 6 metal filing cabinets, a fireproof safe bolted to the floor, a corkboard covered in documents and photos, and a small refrigerator that hummed quietly in the corner. Taped to the top of the safe was a handwritten note. The second key opens this. Wait until you read the letter. I picked up the letter from the table and opened it. Lawrence, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I imagine the last few weeks have been difficult in ways I tried to protect you from. I need to explain what I've done and why. I started this property 3 years ago. Not as storage, as a workspace. You know, I spent 30 years assessing commercial properties in Hennepin County. What you don't know is what I found doing that work. Specifically what I found starting about 6 years ago, when Chet began asking me to look the other way on certain assessments he had financial interests in. I told him no. He found another way. He started falsifying appraisal data on 3 commercial parcels in Wright County, submitting fraudulent comparables to secure inflated loans. I have documented evidence in the red cabinet. I kept reading. In 2019, Chet borrowed $280,000 from our joint savings without my signature. He forged the authorization. I discovered it in February 2020. I didn't confront him. I started documenting instead. In 2021, he began working with a developer named Arvid Fenwick to exploit the Millbrook property's subsurface value. The property sits on a high-capacity limestone aquifer. Current commercial water rights on this parcel, had they been sold to Fenwick's company, would have generated $8 to $12 million in licensing revenue over the next 20 years. I set the letter down, stared at the ceiling of the storage unit, picked it up again. I negotiated a different arrangement. The blue cabinet has the contract. A municipal water authority and a private conservation trust have agreed to a shared rights agreement that generates income for you. Not for Chet, not for Fenwick, at no cost to you. The agreement is already executed. $340,000 annually, beginning the first quarter after my passing. Chet doesn't know the deal is done. He thinks the rights are still negotiable. He's been waiting for me to die so he could pressure you into signing them over. That's why I gave you this property, Lawrence. Not to give you nothing. To give you everything. In a place Chet had no claim to and no ability to touch. One more thing. The safe. Use the second key. Inside is a name and a number. Call her before you do anything else. She signed it the way she always signed notes to me. Just Rose, no surname. Like we were still the only 2 people in the world and she didn't need to specify. I sat in that chair for a long time. Outside I could hear an 18-wheeler on the highway. Wind against the corrugated metal walls. The hum of the little refrigerator. I'd been married to this woman for 38 years. I'd eaten breakfast with her 10,000 mornings. I'd held her hand through chemo and through hospice and through the last night, and she had spent 2 years running a quiet investigation in a storage unit in Denton, Texas, and I hadn't known a thing about it. I opened the safe. Inside, a burner phone, a USB drive labeled Evidence Copy 2, DA Office, and a business card. Valerie Cross, Senior Investigator, Texas Real Estate Commission. Beneath her name, a handwritten note in Rose's hand. She knows everything. Tell her you're Lawrence Dodd. She's been expecting your call. I dialed. She picked up on the second ring. Mr. Dodd, I'm glad you made it. My wife told you about me. Your wife briefed me 14 months ago and checked in every 6 weeks until she couldn't anymore. She was. Valerie Cross paused, and I heard something real in the hesitation. She was one of the most methodical people I've ever worked with. What happens now? We've been building this case since 2022. The evidence in that unit is enough to charge Chet Arnett with mortgage fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to misuse fiduciary authority. The DA's office in Wright County has been briefed. We were waiting for you to make contact before we moved. Your wife's instructions were clear. She didn't want action taken while she was still alive. She said it would have complicated things. I thought of Audrey, my daughter, the way she hadn't met my eyes at the will reading. Does my daughter know? Valerie Cross was quiet for a moment. We don't believe she had direct knowledge of the fraud, but she was aware her husband had financial interests in your property. Whether she knew the details, that's something the investigation will determine. I stayed in Denton that night. There was a motel 3 exits down, cleaner than the one near the lake. I sat at the desk and read through the red cabinet, all of it, for 3 hours. Rose had built a case file that would have impressed a federal auditor. Bank records, forged signature comparables, originals stapled next to copies. A timeline in her handwriting, dates, amounts, account numbers. Photographs of Chet and Fenwick meeting at a job site in Monticello. A printed email chain in which Chet referred to me as the dead weight and to my wife as almost gone. Almost gone. She'd found it. She'd printed it. She'd put it in a red cabinet in a storage unit in Denton, and she'd kept going, kept fighting all the way until she couldn't. My phone buzzed. A text from Chet. Friday deadline. Let me know your decision by noon. I didn't answer. The next morning, I called Patricia Holloway. Sam, she said, then caught herself. Lawrence. Sorry. I've been thinking about you. The water rights deal, I said. Can you confirm it's executed? Signed and filed with Denton County 6 weeks ago, she said. The first payment process is April 15th. $85,000, the quarterly installment. And Chet can't touch it? It's in a revocable trust with you as sole beneficiary. Rose structured it specifically so no power of attorney, no guardianship petition, no creditor action could reach it. She worked with a trust attorney in Dallas for 8 months to make it airtight. I asked about the conservatorship threat. Patricia's voice went steady and precise. If Chet files, he triggers a clause Rose built into the trust. Any legal challenge to the asset by Chester Arnett or any party acting on his behalf automatically transfers a complete copy of the evidence in that storage unit to the Wright County DA, the Texas Real Estate Commission, and the Minnesota Department of Commerce. She paused. Your wife essentially built a tripwire under every door. The next morning, I drove back to the motel near the lake. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I just needed to see the water. I was sitting in the parking lot when Audrey called. Dad, where are you? In Minnesota. Chet says you're refusing to cooperate. I'm not selling the property, I said. She was quiet. Then, I know you're upset about the will. I didn't know she was going to. Did you know about the water rights, Audrey? Silence. Did you know that Chet was planning to sell them to Fenwick's company? I heard her exhale. Chet said the property had potential. He said he could manage it for you. I didn't know the specifics. Your mother found the email where he called her almost gone. I kept my voice even. She printed it out and filed it in a cabinet in Denton. That's what she spent her last year doing. Audrey didn't speak for a long time. I didn't know he said that, she finally said. I'm sorry, I know, I believe you. But I think you need to talk to an attorney. Not Chet's attorney, your own. I hung up. I sat in the parking lot for a while, watching a pair of ducks cross the road toward the lake, unhurried. The lake was gray and flat and wide, and I thought about Rose standing on the dock in her yellow cardigan. I called Valerie Cross and told her I was ready. The arrest happened 11 days later. 2 investigators from the Wright County DA's office and a Texas Real Estate Commission agent served the warrant at Chet's office in Minnetonka. I wasn't there. I'd asked not to be informed of the timing in advance. I found out the way everyone else did, from the local news alert on my phone. Chester Arnett, real estate consultant, arrested on 3 counts of mortgage fraud, 2 counts of forgery, and 1 count of conspiracy. Valerie Cross called me that evening. She said the evidence had been airtight, which was not a word investigators use lightly. She said the Fenwick connection had opened a parallel investigation into the developer himself. She thanked me for making contact when I did. I told her she should be thanking Rose. She said she knew. The morning after the arrest, I drove back down to Denton. I needed to see the property again now that I understood what it was. Not a storage unit. A command center. Evidence locker. Proof that the woman I'd shared 38 years with had been smarter and stronger than I'd ever given myself permission to fully understand. I opened the roll-up door. Fluorescent light. Folding table. 6 cabinets. The little refrigerator still humming. I walked to the corkboard on the back wall and looked at it properly for the first time. Rose had pinned a map of the Millbrook parcel with the aquifer zone marked in blue pencil. Next to it, the executed water rights agreement, clean and signed. Next to that, a photograph. It was the 2 of us. Summer, maybe 10 years ago at a barbecue at the lake house. I had my arm around her shoulders and she was mid-law at something, her head tilted back, her eyes half closed. Somebody else must have taken it because we're both in the frame, both unguarded, both looking like people who didn't know how little time they had. She'd pinned it to the cork board herself, right in the center. I stood there for a while. There was a man named Wallace Briggs who ran the auto shop 2 units down. He knocked on my open door a few days later, introduced himself, said he'd seen Rose come and go over the past few years and wanted to offer his condolences. Smart lady, he said, kept to herself. But she helped me out once. I had a zoning dispute with the county, and she knew exactly who to call. Fixed it in 2 phone calls. He handed me a paper bag. His wife had made a casserole. We stood in the doorway for a while and talked about nothing much. He asked how long I planned to keep the unit. I told him I wasn't sure, that I might do some work from here. He said the neighborhood was quiet, that most of the tenants were small business owners, good people. Rose picked well, I said. He laughed. She did. That was in April. By June, the first quarterly payment had cleared. $85,000. I sat with the bank statement for a long time, just looking at it, the way you look at something that doesn't feel real yet. I called Patricia Holloway. I told her I wanted to set up a structure for the income. Something with staying power. What did you have in mind? She asked. Rose spent 30 years assessing properties for people who couldn't always afford to protect themselves from bad actors. I want to fund a legal aid clinic. Property rights, eviction defense, fraud cases. Somewhere in Wright County, where most of the damage was done. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That's a very Rose thing to do, I know. By autumn, Audrey had filed for divorce. She called me once during the process, not to ask for anything, just to talk. She said she was sorry. She said she should have seen it sooner. I told her she wasn't on trial, that people believe what they want to believe about the people they love. I knew something about that myself. She asked if she could come visit sometime. I said yes. The Wright County DA offered Chet a plea. He took it. 4 years, minimum security. Arvid Fenwick got 18 months and a suspended license. The civil forfeiture proceedings were still untangling themselves, but Valerie Cross said the timeline was favorable. I've been living on the Denton property for 8 months now. Not in the storage unit. I converted the space adjacent to it, a vacant industrial suite, into something livable. Desk, cot, the little refrigerator I kept from Rose's setup, the corkboard still pinned with the aquifer map and the photograph. Some mornings I drive out to look at the limestone ridgeline east of the parcel, where the water table sits quiet under the rock. You'd never know it was there. 8 miles of aquifer under flat Texas scrubland, worth more than any lake house with a wraparound porch. That's what Rose understood. Value isn't always visible on the surface. Sometimes you have to look past the corrugated metal and the chain link fence and the address on an industrial road that nobody would choose if they didn't know what they were choosing. She chose it for me. Wallace Briggs's wife sends a casserole every other week. I've started helping Wallace with his books. Turns out 30 years of shop class teaches you to read a blueprint. And a blueprint for a business isn't so different. We have coffee on Tuesday mornings and argue about baseball. Last week, a first-year law student named Tobias, just starting his clinic rotation at the Wright County Legal Aid Office, sent me an email thanking the foundation for covering his caseload stipend. He said he was working on an eviction defense case involving an elderly widow who'd been defrauded out of her home. He said he thought he could win it. I forwarded the email to Patricia. She wrote back, Rose would approve. I think about forgiveness sometimes. People ask about it, usually the same way they ask whether you've eaten, whether you're sleeping, whether you're okay, with good intentions and a need for a certain kind of answer. The truth is, I'm not sure forgiveness is the right category for what I feel about Chet. He made his choices long before I understood what they were. What I feel is something quieter than anger and something more useful than bitterness. I feel like a man who got to spend 38 years with someone who saw him clearly and decided he was worth protecting. That's not nothing. The roses she planted along the south side of the lake house are Audrey's problem now, and that's fine. What I have is a photograph pinned to a corkboard in a converted storage unit in Denton, Texas. Rose mid-law, yellow cardigan, both of us unguarded, and an aquifer producing clean water under 8 miles of limestone that she found and mapped and fought for, and left to me, knowing I'd figure out what to do with it. She was right, I did.